Oh, Sammy, I'm sorry you fell off your bike. I went walking this afternoon. We've been 2-mile walking, and it's kind of tiring. So, but we didn't fall. I'm sorry you hit the bump and fell. We only have one bike at our house now. We used to have all kinds of bikes because all of our kids had a bike, and I had a bike, and yeah, we had lots of bikes. Now we don't. So thanks for joining in. We have Christina and Sammy here. I know my nephew Abram is at church right now, but he's going to catch the replay. So, hey, Abram, I hope you enjoy our chapters tonight. Possibly my other nephew Hudson might be joining in as well. So, hey, Hudson. I don't know if my aunt's joining in. Aunt Leanne, how are you? Hope you're doing well. So anyone else who's joining in, there's a chat bar. You're more than welcome to let me know you're here so that I can say hi. But we are going to get started with our dear friend Edward, who has been rescued from the bottom of the ocean by a fishing net. And poor Abilene has lost her sweet rabbit. So we will start chapter 8 pretty soon. I'm going to give our friends. Oh, your bike hit the bump and then the bike fell on you. The bike fell with you. Anyway, biking, hills, bumps. Sometimes it gets kind of wonky. No, okay. So anyway, there was a bike and there was a Samuel, and something happened. You have a scratch now. I'm sorry. I was moving furniture yesterday, and I noticed a couple of scratches on my hands from moving furniture. So those hurt pretty bad. So at 7:03, we'll get started. Looks like I have 3 people on. I'm not sure exactly if it's 3, maybe 3. That number changes a lot, so I don't exactly know how that works. So we'll get started in just a few seconds. And I will read you a couple of last sentences from the chapter previous, and then I will show you the picture for chapter 8. So anyway, and we will continue our journey with Mr. Edward himself. Mr. Edward, the rabbit, not the bunny. So, Christina, can you hear me well? Is my voice clear? So I hope y'all had a great day. We got a little bit of a shower at our house today. So it kind of watered our plants and just kind of cooled it off. But then the heat came back and made it a little bit humid. But anyway, it was good for us. So I'm about to get started. So here we go. The last sentence from previous chapter says, or last couple of sentences. Look at that rabbit, the old man said. Looks like it's enjoying the ride, don't it? Yep, said the young man. In fact, Edward Tulane was so happy to be back among the living that he did not even take umbrage at being referred to as it. We know normally calling him it was very condescending. So here we have chapter 8, and we have a rabbit sitting atop of an old sailor. Here we go. On land, the old fisherman stopped to light a pipe, and then with the pipe clenched between his teeth, he walked home, carrying Edward atop his left shoulder as if he were a conquering hero. The fisherman balanced him there, placing a calloused hand on Edward's back. He talked to him in a low, soft voice as they walked. You'll like Nellie, you will, said the old man. She's had her sadness, but she's an all right girl. Edward looked at the small town blanketed in dusk. A jumble of buildings huddled together, the ocean stretching out in front of it all. He thought that he would like anything and anybody that was not at the bottom of the sea. Hello, Lawrence, called a woman from the front of a shop. What have you got? Fresh catch, said the fisherman. Fresh rabbit from the sea. He lifted his cap to the lady and kept walking. There you are now, said the fisherman. He took the pipe out of his mouth and pointed with the stem of it at a star in the purpling sky. There's your North Star right there. Don't never have to be lost when you know where that fellow is. Edward considered the brightness of the small star. Do they all have names? He wondered. Listen at me, said the fisherman. Talking to a toy. Oh, well, here we are then. And with Edward still on his shoulder, the fisherman walked up a stone-lined path and into a little greenhouse. Look here, Nellie, he said. I've brought you something from the sea. I don't want nothing from the sea, came a voice. Aw, now, don't be like that, now. Come and see, then. An old woman stepped out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. And when she saw Edward, she dropped the apron and clapped her hands together and said, Oh, Lawrence, you brung me a rabbit. Direct from the sea, said Lawrence. He took Edward off his shoulder and he stood him up on the floor and held onto his hands and made him take a deep bow in the direction of Nellie. Oh, said Nellie, here. She clapped her hands together and Lawrence passed Edward to her. Nellie held the rabbit out in front of her and looked him over from tip to toe. She smiled. Have you ever in your life seen anything so fine? She said. Edward felt immediately that Nellie was a very discerning woman. She's beautiful, breathed Nellie. For a moment, Edward was confused. Was there some other object of beauty in the room? What will I call her? Susanna? Said Lawrence. Just right, said Nellie. Susanna. She looked deep into Edward's eyes. First off, Susanna, we'll need some clothes, won't she? She's calling Edward Susanna. So there we have Lawrence, the old fisherman. And we have Nellie, the old lady. And now we have Susanna, not Edward. Chapter 9. Oh, Edward. And so Edward Tulane became Susanna. Nellie sewed several outfits for him, a pink dress with ruffles for special occasions, a simple shift fashioned out of a flower-covered cloth for everyday use, and a long white gown made of cotton for Edward to sleep in. In addition, she remade his ears, stripping them of the few pieces of fur that remained and designing him a new pair. Oh, she told him when she was done, you look lovely. He was horrified at first. He was, after all, a boy rabbit. He did not want to be dressed as a girl, and the outfits, even the special occasion dress, were so simple and so plain. They lacked the elegance and artistry of his real clothes. But then Edward remembered lying on the ocean floor, the muck in his face, the stars so far away, and he said to himself, what difference does it make, really? Wearing a dress won't hurt me. Besides, life in the little greenhouse with the fisherman and his wife was sweet. Nellie loved to bake, and so she spent her day in the kitchen. She put Edward on the counter and leaned him up against the flour canister and arranged his dress around his knees. She bent his ears so that he could hear well, and then she set to work, kneading dough for bread and rolling out dough for cookies and pies. The kitchen soon filled with the smell of baking bread and with sweet smells of cinnamon and sugar. and cloves. The window steamed up, and while Nellie worked, she talked. She told Edward about her children, her daughter Lolly, who was a secretary, and her boys Ralph, who was in the army, and Raymond, who had died of pneumonia when he was only 5 years old. He drowned inside of himself, said Nellie. It is a horrible, terrible thing, the worst thing, to watch somebody you love die right in front of you and not be able to do nothing about it. I dream about him most nights. Nellie wiped at her tears with the back of her hands. She smiled at Edward. I suppose you think I'm daft talking to a toy, but it seems to me that you are listening, Susanna. And Edward was surprised to discover that he actually was listening. Before, when Abilene talked to him, everything had seemed so boring, so pointless. But now, the stories Nellie told struck him at the most important thing in the world, and he listened as if his life depended on what she said. It made him wonder if some of the muck from the ocean floor had gotten inside his china head and damaged him somehow. In the evening, Lawrence came home from the sea, and there was dinner, and Edward sat at the table with the fisherman and his wife. He sat in an old wooden high chair, and while at first he was mortified, a high chair, after all, was a chair designed for babies, not elegant rabbits. He soon became used to it. He liked being up high, looking out over the table instead of staring at the tablecloth, as he had at the Tulane household. He liked feeling like a part of the things. And every night after dinner, Lawrence said that he thought he would go out and get some fresh air, and that maybe Susanna would like to come with him. He placed Edward on his shoulder, as he had the very first night when he walked him through town, bringing him home to Nellie. They went outside, and Lawrence lit his pipe and held Edward there on his shoulder. And if the night was clear, Lawrence said the names of the constellations, one at a time. Andromeda, Pegasus, pointing at them with the stem of his pipe. Edward loved looking up at the stars, and he loved the sounds of the constellation names. They were sweet in his ears. Sometimes, though, staring up at the night sky, Edward remembered Pellegrina, saw again her dark and glowing eyes, and a chill would go straight through him. Warthogs, he would think. Witches. But Nellie, before she put him to bed each night, sang Edward a lullaby, a song about a mockingbird that did not sing, and a diamond ring that would not shine, and the sound of Nellie's voice soothed the rabbit, and he forgot about Pellegrina. Life, for a very long time, was sweet. And then Lawrence and Nellie's daughter came for a visit. That's all of chapter 9, moving to chapter 10. I'm assuming that is the high chair that he sits in at Lawrence and Nellie's little green home. Lolly was a lumpy woman who spoke too loudly and who wore way too much lipstick. She entered the house and immediately spotted Edward sitting on the living room couch. "What's this?" she said. She put down her suitcase and picked Edward up by one foot. She held him upside down. "That's Susanna," said Nellie. "Susanna!" shouted Lolly. She gave Edward a shake. His dress was up over his head, and he could see nothing. Already he had formed a deep and abiding hatred for Lolly. "Your father found her," said Nellie. "She came up in a net, and she didn't have no clothes on her, so I made her some dresses." "Have you gone skivvy?" shouted Lolly. "Rabbits don't need clothes." "Well," said Nellie. Her voice shook. "This one seemed to." Lolly tossed Edward back on the couch. He landed face down with his arms over his head and his dress still over his face, and he stayed that way all the way through dinner. "Why have you got out that old high chair?" shouted Lolly. "Oh, don't pay it no mind," said Nellie. "Your father was just gluing on a missing piece. Wasn't you, Lawrence?" "That's right," said Lawrence without looking up from his plate. Of course, after dinner, Edward did not go outside and stand beneath the stars to have a smoke with Lawrence. And Nellie, for the first time since Edward had been with her, did not sing him a lullaby. In fact, Edward was ignored and forgotten about until the next morning, when Lolly picked him up again and pulled his dress down away from his face and stared him in the eye. "Got the old folks bewitched, don't you?" said Lolly. "I heard the talk in the town, that they've been treating you like a rabbit child." Edward stared back at Lolly. Her lipstick was a bright and bloody red, and he felt a cold breeze blow through the room. Was a door open somewhere? "Well, you don't fool me," she said. She gave him a shake. "We'll be taking a trip together, you and me." Holding Edward by the ears, Lolly marched into the kitchen and shoved him face down into the garbage can. "Ma," Lolly shouted, "I'm taking the truck and I'm going to head on out and do some errands." "Oh," came Nellie's tremulous voice. "That's wonderful, dear. Goodbye, then." Goodbye, thought Edward as Lolly hauled the garbage can out to the truck. "Goodbye," Nellie called again, louder this time. Edward felt a sharp pain somewhere deep inside his china chest. For the very first time, his heart called out to him, and it said two words: "Nellie, Lawrence." And that's all of chapter 10. I guess we'll do chapter 11. Edward ended up at the dump. He lay on top of orange peels, coffee grounds, rancid bacon, and rubber tires. The first night he was at the top of the garbage heap, and so he was able to look up at the stars and find comfort in their light. In the morning, a short man came climbing through the trash and rubble. He stopped when he was standing on top of the highest pile, and he put his hands under his armpits and flapped his elbows. The man crowed loudly. He shouted, "Who am I? I'm Ernest, who is king of the world. How can I be king of the world? Because I am the king of garbages, and garbages is what the world is made of. Ha ha ha! Therefore I am Ernest, who is king of the world," he crowed again. Edward was inclined to agree with Ernest's assessment of the world being made of garbage, especially after his second day at the dump, when a load of trash was deposited directly on top of him. He lay there, buried alive. He could not see the sky. He could not see the stars. He could see nothing. What kept Edward going, what gave him hope, was thinking of how he would find Lolly and exact his revenge. He would pick her up by the ears, and he would bury her under a mountain of trash. But after almost 40 days and 40 nights had passed, the weight and the smell of the garbage above and below him clouded Edward's thoughts. And soon he gave up thinking about revenge and gave in to despair. It was worse, much worse, than being buried at sea. It was worse because Edward was a different rabbit now. He couldn't say how he was different, he just knew that he was. He remembered again Pellegrina's story about the princess who had loved nobody. The witch turned her into a warthog because she loved nobody. He understood that now. He heard Pellegrina say, "You disappoint me." "Why?" he asked her. "Why do I disappoint you?" But he knew the answer to that question too. It was because he had not loved Aibileen enough. And now she was gone from him, and he would never be able to make it right. And Nellie and Lawrence were gone too. He missed them terribly. He wanted to be with them. The rabbit wondered if that was love. Day after day passed, and Edward was aware of time passing only because every morning he could hear Ernest performing his dawn ritual, cackling and crowing about being the king of the world. On his 180th day at the dump, salvation arrived for Edward in a most unusual form. The garbage around him shifted, and the rabbit heard the sniffing and panting of a dog. Then came the frenzied sound of digging. The garbage shifted again, and suddenly, miraculously, the beautiful, buttery light of late afternoon shone on Edward's face. And that's all we have for tonight. Edward's been rescued again. So the question I ask is, has he been changed? And I can confidently say Edward has definitely changed. And he's definitely been changed. And when he says his salvation has come, we know that salvation means new life. And the only way we can have new life is salvation in Christ Jesus himself. So, the story is a beautiful story of trials and hard things and hard relationships and beautiful relationships and humility and pride and forgiveness and redemption. So we will read again tomorrow. Starting in chapter 12, I will show you the picture for chapter 12. Here we go. Edward has been found, and this time it's a puppy dog. So please have a joyous evening with your family, or if you're by yourself, then enjoy your sweet time. I love y'all. Have a great evening, second graders. Tomorrow we will Zoom at 10 o'clock and we'll do our scavenger hunt. So get your running feet on, recruit some people to help. Have a wonderful evening. I love you. Thanks for joining. Oh, Sammy, how many chapters are there? Let me tell you. There are 27 chapters, and we're on chapter 12. So we'll do 4 more chapters tomorrow, and we will probably finish it the next week. So anyway, bye-bye. Love y'all. Have a glorious evening and a great day tomorrow. Look forward to reading tomorrow night. Love you all. Bye.